Talofa lava, my name is Leslie Nunez Goodman, and I am the Country Public Affairs Officer for the U.S. Embassy to Samoa. I am joined by our incredible team that helps support our public diplomacy efforts in Samoa. Let's start with Perilaroe Seosi. Can you say hello? We're also joined by Veronica Mortensen.
Hi.
Angela Kennedy.
Hello.
And Mara Hosadasua. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We're really excited to talk to you for the second time about our public diplomacy grant opportunities. First, a little bit about what is public diplomacy. Our job is to actually connect the people of Samoa to the people of the United States, and also to partner with you on the ground on projects and programs that we both care about, whether that be climate change, whether that be working on getting more young women to think about science, technology, engineering, and math, whether that be working together on cultural preservation. And the way we are able to do this is with our grants program. This is funding that we put out that's available to you through what we think is a fairly easy application process. To tell you a little bit more about our public diplomacy grants programs, I'm going to toss it over to our public affairs officer, Angela Kennedy. Angela?
Thanks, Leslie, so much. And hello, everyone on the call today. As Leslie mentioned, I am the Public Affairs Officer here in Auckland. And as Public Affairs sections, our mission, like Leslie mentioned, is to expand and strengthen the relationships between the people of the United States and citizens of other countries, like Samoa. And to me, this is one of the best parts of my jobs, is the building this relationship through these small grants, supporting the good work that you're all already doing on the ground. And the U.S. Embassy Samoa Public Affairs section offers these opportunities annually. This year, we have up to $50,000 US for small grants, and we can fund each grant up to about $15,000 US. This is based, of course, on the funding that we get from Congress, and also, of course, our priorities and strategic themes that do sometimes change, but I would say generally remain pretty stable. I'll describe some of those priority areas for you all, but first, maybe it's important to explain what our small grants are not. And there may be other ways to fund these types of activities, but and we're, of course, not the only U.S. government funder in Samoa, but projects that are not eligible for funding under the Embassy Small Grants Program include activities that have a partisan political activity or fundraising campaigns, or support a specific religious activity instead of supporting more broadly ideals and values of democracy or inclusion. Our small grants cannot support charitable or development activities, and we cannot support construction projects or scientific research. And finally, a big one is projects that seek funding for personal use. We cannot fund those. If you have questions or concerns about any of the ways that you can use our funding, please read our notice of funding opportunity, which you'll hear more about, and reach out to us via email. We're always happy to answer any of those kind of questions. One of the most important elements, however, of a small grant that I want to tell you about is that there must be a U.S. element, a U.S. component to the grants. There are tons, there are amazing organizations out there that deserve funding, but as U.S. Embassy funding goes, again, as our mission is to promote increased understanding of the United States, including but not limited to our U.S. policy, our U.S. people, our U.S. culture or values and or perspectives, we have to have that element clearly defined in a small grants application. Ways you can do that, we can discuss that further in these presentations. But often ways that you add a U.S. element is by using a U.S. American speaker or expert to talk on to be a part of your grants, or to use an alumni of a previous U.S. government program or grant. We can, again, talk more about specific examples later on in the presentation. But what are those goals that I mentioned earlier? Again, the Notice of Funding Opportunity has all of the detail on this, but grants that we approve will often focus on at least one of the following: strengthening the U.S. and Samoa cooperation, that bilateral relationship, strengthening cooperation and the relationship on shared issues of shared interest. Like Leslie mentioned, combating climate change is a big one, supporting Indo-Pacific security, or promoting diversity and inclusion. These are all really big topics of interest for us that we share. Increasing connections in general between the US and Samoa, but more specifically with youth, promoting democratic institutions or civic engagement, advancing STEAM, so science and technology, especially with young women and girls and children, tech innovation, supporting human rights, promoting mutual benefits of bilateral trade and investment between Samoa and the US. These are some of the main priority areas that we have this year. And so maybe some examples of that in the past could be an academic or professional lecture on a topic, using a speaker program, bringing in a workshop that is an artistic or cultural endeavor between our two countries, exchanges, professional or academic exchanges and programs. So that's kind of a broad overview, I would say, of our small grants and what we're looking for. But you probably want to know kind of what that actually looks like on the ground. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues at the embassy in Samoa, who can share some more of the stories about a few of the grants that we have run in Samoa. So I will pass it over to you, Pere. Thank you all.
Thank you, Angela, for that overview on what we can and cannot grant. Perry here in Embassy Apia. Now we will be looking at a few examples of programs that were granted over the past 3 years under the small grants. Please take specific notice of the American component that was used by each organization. Starting with the Samoa Recycling and Waste Management Association, SWRMA. In 2019, SWRMA was issued a grant total of $14,000 to help build awareness on recycling and remove waste oil from Samoa. As part of this grant, SWRMA purchased a glass crusher machine, as seen in the first image below, with the overall aim to minimize the amount of glass pollution by collecting glass and turning it into sand. Under this grant, SWRMA set up its waste oil management facility to collect waste oil from cars and dispose of them properly. The overall focus of this grant was to build awareness for communities, schools, and organizations to care for the environment, leading up to its cleanup programs that took place along the urban areas in Upolu. This grant ties back to shared policies for the US and Samoa on practices to reduce, reuse, and recycle in order to care for our environment. Next, we have the Samoa Association of Sign Language Interpreters, SASLI. In 2020, SASLI was issued a grant total of $10,000 to hold awareness programs for the deaf and hard of hearing community to gain better access to information. This also paved the way to teach basic sign language to the public to bridge the gap between communities, encouraging organizations, government, and the private sector to take into consideration the importance of ensuring any form of information is available to all. SASLI, through its workshops, engaged with participants through teaching different types of sign language, with the primary focus on teaching the American Sign Language, to which was interesting, as the organization discovered that most of the sign language that they used daily had originated from the American Sign Language. Below, you will see images from two different workshops. The first being for the deaf and hard hearing community, and the second is from the workshop that was that included members from the media, government, and non-government organizations. The last grant we will be looking at is from last year's 2001 Small Grants Program, which was issued to the Brown Girl Woke, a total of $10,000 to fund science, technology, and English and math, STEM, focused educational programs for girls and women with the overarching goal to promote STEM-related career paths. Brown Girl Woke, using its connections and in partnership with U.S. founded program Girl Start, to provide access to additional materials and information to inspire girls and women in STEM fields or careers. Featured below are young ladies during one of the Brown Girl Woke program after-class STEM program. These are just a few examples from over the past few years on the grants that have been funded under our program. Thank you from me, and now I hand it over to my colleague Mara Hosoda. Fafitat.
All right, Talofa Samoa. I'm switching gears a little bit to talk about another program that we run here at the UDIS Department of State, and I promise it is related to the grants that you guys have heard about so far. But a little bit about this program first. This is our Young Pacific Leaders Program. It's the U.S. Department of State's signature leadership development program for our Pacific region. It includes young people. So when we say young, it's usually typically leaders 20 and above. In terms of Pacific, it includes 24 Pacific nations, including Samoa and American Samoa, but also my home state of Hawaii, as well as the Northern Pacific, the French Pacific, and New Zealand, Australia, and all of the South Pacific. In terms of the types of leaders that come through this program, it's leaders who are focused on the 4 pillars of the program, which are education, social and economic development, civic participation, and environment and resource management. Now, what does this program include? One of the main features of the Young Pacific Leaders Program is an annual conference that we have that bring representatives together from the 24 Pacific nations. This photo was taken from our last in-person conference that was held in Fiji. In particular, this picture was taken outside of the Pacific Islands Forum, where young Pacific leaders had the opportunity to take the place and sit in the seats of senior Pacific leaders to discuss regional issues such as security and climate change, essentially running a mock Pacific Islands Forum. Your representatives from Samoa in that year were Nathan Chongne'e and Christine Tuioti Mariner. The program also includes a number of other components, such as exchanges, volunteer and service activities, as well as small grants. In fact, right now we're also recruiting for a professional fellowship program, which will enable Pacific leaders to do a fellowship in a U.S. NGO, government organization, or business sector. And in return, after completion of that fellowship, you're able to bring the learnings that you found back to Samoa or the country that you're from. So that's just an overview of the program and different components that we have with YPL. But as related to this particular topic, Young Pacific Leaders also offers a small grants program, similar to that of the embassy. So these are grants that are worth up to $10,000 USD. Some examples, similar to the ones that Pere shared, are captured in these pictures. So in the top left-hand corner, this is a grant that was issued to Fina Finau. This program created an exchange between American Samoa and Samoa for high school youth, with the objective of sharing best practices in environmental conservation. So, for example, as a part of that program, youth from American Samoa came and visited Samoa to visit organizations like SPREP and others, as well as to work with their Samoa counterparts to plant indigenous trees and undertake other volunteer activities. The youth, in fact, planted enough trees, indigenous trees, to offset the carbon emissions from the conference that was held. So again, you can see that American component, because it was an exchange between American Samoa and Samoa. Now, the other example I have for you today is in the bottom right-hand corner, and this project was entitled Talita Olelumanai. It was focused on traditional ways of navigation on board vessels such as the Nga'alofa. In this program, young leaders learned the traditional ways of navigating and wayfinding, but they also learned best practices both from Samoa as well as Hawaii. And that really, was with the purpose of cultural preservation. So those are the two examples that I have for you. And just to emphasize, if you're interested in learning more about the Young Pacific Leaders page and all of our opportunities we have throughout the Pacific region, please do follow us on Facebook at We Are Young Pacific Leaders. And you can also sign up to join the Young Pacific Leaders Network on our website by just entering a couple of details, your name and your email and country. That way you can hear the latest and greatest opportunities from our network. So that concludes my talk today. I'll now hand you over to Tracy Zemanek.
Kia ora koutou, talofa. My name is Tracy Zemanek. I work at the US Embassy in Wellington, and I am the Public Affairs Resource Management Specialist for our Embassy in Wellington, our Consulate in Auckland, and also for our Embassy in Apia. One of the big parts of my job is the day-to-day management of our grants program. I am the logistics specialist, the person who knows all the rules and the regulations and the can-do and the can't-dos when it comes to grants. So it's my job to be a resource to all of our public affairs team, and as an extension of that, to all of our grantees as well, as to what grants can be approved, what items we can grant money for, and all the little finicky details like that. So I wanted to go through with you just a couple of things that might potentially cause your grant application to be rejected, or at least might bring us to come back to you to ask a few further questions. So you would have heard a lot from my other colleagues about American content. This is the biggest thing that ends up with us having to decline a grant application, a lack of American content. There are many, many different types of American content. You will have seen and heard about some of those in the presentations from my colleague in Samoa Pere and from Mara Hosoda up in Auckland. They can be partnering with organizations in the United States to bring their programs to Samoa. They can be involved in bringing a subject matter expert, a speaker, to come over to Samoa to do a speaker series, or to teach various groups and organizations some of our American best practices. There are lots and lots of different options. And we do our very best to be as liberal as we possibly can, but the biggest cause of the rejection of a grant application is always going to be a lack of American content. So please make sure that you keep that in mind when you're doing your application. If you have any questions on whether or not an idea of yours constitutes American content, please feel free to contact the embassy staff in Apia, who will be able to help you with that, or if they need extra clarification, they will be able to come through to me directly and I'll be able to help them with that. The second thing that I wanted to talk about relates to our notice of funding opportunity. On the notice of funding opportunity, we list out what our priorities are for our grants programs for any given year within Samoa. So these are the areas that I believe my colleague Angela Kennedy talked about that are the priorities that we are looking at. And this is what we want to see applications from everyone related to. The biggest thing with this is please don't just write down the priority straight from our notice of funding opportunity that your grant applies to. Please tell us why. It is very, very important that you explain to us how your grant application relates to our priorities and how it's going to fulfill those priorities. Otherwise, again, you may risk your grant being rejected. So those are two of the biggest reasons that a grant may be rejected. The other thing that I'd like to do is I would like to share with you, if I can figure out how to share my screen, is the very first form that you will be filling in if you want to apply to the embassy for a grant. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see what I've just put up on my screen. Okay, so this is a form that you'll be able to access through our Embassy in Samoa's website or by contacting the staff at the Embassy in Apia and to email to you. So the very first thing we're asking for is a project title. This is, of course, the project of the title that you would like us to fund and the amount that you would like for your project. Next up, we have the introduction to your organisation. So as it says here, please provide us with a brief introduction to your organisation, what the purpose of your organisation is, and anything else that you think that we would like to know about who you are. Next down is the problem statement. This is the problem that you have noticed, that you have seen, the situation that you think needs to be fixed, that you would like to have our assistance with a grant to fix. So please be very clear on what it is that you are trying to address, what the situation is. Next up is the description of the project of the event that will be supported by the grant. This is where you can tell us what exactly it is that you want to do. This might be a series of speakers. This might be a project to go out and plant trees. Whatever it is, please make sure you put down in as much detail as possible what it is that you would like the grant to fund. Next, we have the project objectives. These are your aims and your goals for your project. This is how you are going to be able to show us that the project that you undertake, should we fund your grant, is actually a success. So this could be a number of people attended various programs, a number of trees were planted, a recycling plant was started up, as with our recycling grant from a couple of years ago. But these need to be measurable, quantifiable objectives that you can come back to us at the end of your grant period and say, yes, we achieved everything that we set out to. Or if there was something that we didn't achieve, this is why we weren't able to achieve that. Next up is the budget. It is very important in here to be as detailed as you possibly can. There are lots of different things that our funding can be used for, but there are some things that they can't be used for. We need to know right from the very beginning what it is that you are looking to fund as part of the grant. So please provide as much detail as possible here. The next section down below is any other budget details. Now, it's not uncommon for our grants to be one of many grants that an organisation might be applying for in order to complete a project. We understand that our grant funding is possibly and potentially not enough to fund an entire project, and that you may also have other interested parties that have also agreed to it, to assist with your funding. So this is where you would provide details to us of who else it is that you are receiving funding from. Just one thing on this other budget details, this is not a reason for the US Embassy to reject anyone's grant. We are not looking at who else you might be receiving funding from. We will never use this particular option, these particular details in that to make a decision as to whether or not we will fund your grant. This is just additional information that we find it very useful to have. Next down, the implementation or timeline of your project. Our grants can run anything from a few months up to 24 months, so 2 years in total. So we would like you to tell us what your timeline is for your project, how long your planning process will be, when your program will take place, how long it's going to run for, and any follow-up activities that you might have as part of your program. Moving along, next up is project evaluation. This is where you tell us what methods and what criteria you are going to use to determine and to show us that your project was a success. Again, this may be similar to your objectives with a number of people attending a lecture series, a number of trees planted. There can be lots of different ways to evaluate it, but please do make sure that you tell us how it is that you will evaluate your program. Moving down and almost at the end of this form now, future funding or sustainability. If this is a grant that you're looking for to start off a program that is going to carry on in the future, we would like to know what your plans are to be able to make this a self-sustaining program that will be able to continue past the single year that we give you funding for. So if that is the case with your program, please do tell us how you plan to fund this in the future. Okay, almost at the end now. The last section is key personnel. This is where you can tell us who it is that we are going to be dealing with, who the key people are in your organisation. And right at the very end of the form, you see that there is the email address that you can submit the completed form to, and the address you can drop the form off to if you want to deliver it in person. APIA have requested that typed and emailed submissions are most preferred. And if you have any inquiries, please email apiapd@state.gov or give them a call at the embassy to talk in more detail. All right. Thank you very much. I am going to pass over to my boss, Leslie Goodman, for a wrap up.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, team. I think you did an excellent job sharing that information. I'm going to try to unshare the docs here. Just one moment. Hopefully everyone can see me now. I want to thank the team again for an excellent job. The bottom line is we wanted to put this webinar together for you, not to scare you with too much information, although we did give you a lot of information throughout this webinar, but to encourage you to apply, because there is no idea too small or too big that we cannot consider. And through the application process, often we can work with organizations to fine-tune their ideas in order to make them work for our funding purposes. Now, we wanted to leave it open to all of you to ask your questions, please put them in the comments. Our team is still working on them, and we're happy to take them. I did get one question already in the comments, and one was, would you be able to help identify potential American resource people we may require? I believe the question is referring to, can you help us identify potential speakers, potential US participants for your idea? And the answer is maybe, yes. Let's say you have an idea on a particular topic or an area that you would like to work in, but you don't know necessarily who are the best US experts and program people to maybe include. Yes, we can work with you to identify potential US speakers, US experts, US organizations that you can potentially partner with. We do ask that you do a little bit of Google research and internet research and see if there's anyone that you think might be available, but we can also help you as a mission as well to identify potential people. We're looking to see if there's any other questions. Not sure if there's any more, but we will give it a minute or two. Some people often ask us, well, when do we will get a decision? We do view these grants on a rolling basis. Usually per quarter, we'll take a look at all the applications as a bunch. So probably at least 4 times a year, we're looking to see what kind of applications we have gotten in. And then we prioritize them based on which ones we think will be the most successful and which ones will we think have the potential for having the biggest impact. If there are no further questions, maybe I will just make sure that the team has any final words. Oh, looks like we got one question in. Will it be impacting us if we were granted grants before, but we apply again? Absolutely not. You are not impacted if you have received a grant before and if you apply again. Our priority is always to work with new partners because part of what we're trying to do is really engage the broadest community possible. But a lot of times we do grant organizations a few times throughout the course of that organization's lifespan, particularly if they keep coming up with really good ideas. So no penalty whatsoever. And no penalty also if you were denied before and then you give it a go again, has no impact. Checking to see if we have any other questions. Is research included in grants? So can you apply for a grant for research? Potentially. Like I said, these grants are pretty flexible. We can consider a lot of different things within these grants. So I would say depends. Depends on the kind of research, depends on what you're trying to do. I would encourage you to apply and have a go. Because it could be that doing research, for example, on shared cultural history between United States and Samoa could be a potential grant. I don't know. I can't tell you until I actually see the application. But no, research could potentially be something that we fund. Yep, somebody made the point, and then this is a good one. We don't give grants for personal study. So we can't grant an individual, for example, to get a master's degree, let's say in the United States. It does have to be for a community project. So good point on that. Do we have a criteria for organizations that apply? Not pretty broad on organizations that apply. They cannot be for profit, right? So it cannot be a private corporation. In other words, not to pick on Coca-Cola, but let's say Coca-Cola cannot apply for a grant. It has to be for nonprofit organizations or individuals. But pretty broad in terms of which kind of organizations that can apply. Are there any other questions out there? I'll open it up to my team. Is there something else that you feel like we should mention? We got another question. A follow-up. How about a youth group applying for a program that is non-religious but focuses on a community need? We absolutely work with religious organizations around the globe. Often, those are the best ways to do community projects in many places around the world. So no, religious organizations are not prohibited from applying for these grants. So yes, a religious youth group could apply for a grant for a community project. Can this grant able to help on farming agriculture for the community village? Potentially. Again, without seeing the grant, I can't be predisposed to tell you yay or nay, but please do keep in mind that American component. What is the US component for exchange on this? And then depending on the kind of impact that it would have on the community and if it meets our priorities, it may or may not be approved. But yes, if there is some sort of exchange component in terms of agriculture, it could be potentially funded. In your experience, what has been the most common reason that grant applications have been denied in the past? I would say the number one reason is missing that US exchange component. So wonderful idea, wonderful impact for the community, but there is no participation in terms of the United States at all. So it doesn't share a similar practice in the United States. It doesn't involve the US Embassy to Samoa in any way, or it doesn't relate to one of the US priorities in terms of the Pacific region and in terms of Samoa. So I would say that tends to be the biggest reason why a grant is not approved. How about schools, please? Are they eligible to apply, please? Yes, absolutely. Schools are definitely eligible to apply, and we encourage you to do so. We would be more than happy to partner with schools and different organizations in that vein. In fact, we do partner with the Ministry of Education, for example, through our American Corner space in Apia, which, by the way, if you don't know about, you should. And we do have Veronica Mortensen on the line. We do have English tutorials throughout the week. We just restarted them up, and that's another avenue where you can approach someone from the embassy to ask questions. Just a small plug for American Corner. Is the involvement of a US citizen considered American content? Possibly, yes. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a US citizen. Let's say that it's not a US citizen, but they are giving information about the United States or best practice in the United States. For example, sharing American Sign Language. It didn't have to be a US citizen teaching that. So the answer is yes, but you don't have to have a US citizen. Yeah, and having, somebody pointed out, Tracy's behind me, she's like, and having a US citizen does not guarantee that it will be approved. Any other questions? These are all good ones. I'll give it another minute. And if we don't have any other questions, we'll wrap this up. But say that we are always available to answer your questions. I personally, along with Petty and other members of the team, we answer your questions on Facebook Messenger. We provide information on Twitter. Comments tend to get a little less information, so please do direct message us. We provide an email address in that grants website, so please continue to reach out. We're not one and done with this webinar. We're always happy to answer your questions and provide more information. So with that, we'll call it a wrap for our webinar. Again, available to answer any and all your questions. I'm standing by because it looks like maybe one more question is coming in. I see Petty typing. And Petty, feel free to just turn on your video and say it out loud if you'd like. Can this grant fund some resources for youth study? Like I said, that one is tricky. We cannot use the grant for individuals to fund their tuition at school. It does have to be a broader community-based program with an actual exchange component. We got another one. So we have, with existing projects, will you be able to identify what you can assist and cannot assist relatively to? So in other words, like if you have an ongoing project and you're looking for funding with it, we cannot, you can ask us questions related to the project and ask us out, basically, look, these are these ideas, does this qualify or not? But honestly, what we like to try to do to make it equal to all organizations that are applying is, most often than not, what we'll say is put in a proposal and allow the grants committee to review that. And then we can say yay or nay. And then you can always ask follow-up questions after that. Yeah, I see maybe more questions coming in. Okay, I think we are, no, Petty, maybe one more. Contact information. And again, Petty, you can just, okay. Petty's providing some contact information. Again, Facebook Messenger is a good way to reach us. You can also put more questions in the comments and we'll be monitoring that for the rest of today to make sure. You can also email Appia PD, like public diplomacy, at state.gov, or you can call 21631 extension 2232. Again, that's Appia PD at state.gov or 21631 extension 2232. All right, we got a request for a successful program that you granted here in Samoa and New Zealand, and they incorporate the American component. We actually did that earlier in our webinar. We gave lots of different examples. So rather than going back to those, what I would encourage you to do is, we did this webinar earlier a month ago, and we put the video up on the website. You can review that video again, and that actually provides a lot of examples of different grants that we have done in Samoa as well as New Zealand. And we've added our contact details as a comment as well. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for your participation. Thank you, Team Public Diplomacy Samoa. And we look forward to reviewing your grants and proposals and working with you on these great projects. Thank you so much, everyone.